afternoon. It's an absolute pleasure to be here in sunny London today on home turf. I'm Emma Joyce, the CEO of GBBC Digital Finance. We'll be talking today about the impact the economic landscape has on the global FinTech sector and how regulators around the world can help ensure innovation thrives while still protecting consumers. I'm really pleased to be joined by such a knowledgeable group of panellists today, and I'm going to ask them to please introduce themselves. Anna, if you would like to start.
Thanks, Emma. Hello, everyone. Great to see you all here today at IFGS. So I represent Australian Trade Investment Commission. I'm the Trade Investment Commissioner to the UK and Ireland. And our role is pretty simple. We help Australian businesses expand and grow in international markets like the UK and Ireland. And we also work with international businesses, helping them expand and grow in Australia. And we work with a number of businesses in a room here today, and happy to support any other businesses who are interested in expanding to Australia.
Reuben.
Hi everyone, my name is Reuben from Singapore FinTech Association. And at Singapore FinTech, there are about 1,500 Singapore FinTech companies right now, and we represent about more than half of them within the association. And within the whole association, we have a variety of them, from RegTech, InsurTech, Web3, Green FinTech, etc. So, and similar to what Austrade does, part of our mandate is to support Singapore FinTech companies moving out of Singapore. But we too welcome UK companies coming to Singapore, and we'd love to support them too.
Hi everybody, my name is Chorazak. I'm a partner at Shearman and Sterling in New York. We service the FinTech communities both in New York and in London, and we're a full-service law firm. Apart from servicing clients on things like M&A and capital markets transactions, we help advise clients on the regulatory landscape, both in the US and the UK, and on enforcement and other licensing matters.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Ravi. I'm Head of Innovation for the FCA, and also Chair of the Global Financial Innovation Network. Innovation is quite a broad area across the FCA, comprising of 7 teams. Many of those talented individuals are here today as well during IFGS. And those teams range from our market innovation services, RegTech and SupTech, emerging technology and research, including focusing on artificial intelligence, operating our GFin as well. And a theme which keeps coming to mind over the course of today is the reputation that the UK and the FCA has built up as a global leader in regulatory innovation. And it's for that reason that we've established a new vision for FCA innovation to set a new global gold standard for regulatory innovation.
Wonderful. Thank you all very much. Well, let's get down to really the main question of the panel. What is happening in your regions to help innovation? Ravi, could I start with you, please?
Yeah, sure. So I think first of all, it's important to recognise, why does the FCA have an innovation agenda? We believe that innovation can be a positive driving force in promoting competition in the interest of consumers. But if we have a regulator that supports a diverse range of customer-centric business models, that can help preserve market integrity and also help protect consumers. So we're intrinsically linked to all 3 of our statutory objectives. And consumer protection is really, really important for us. It's a core component of our eligibility criteria for all of our innovation services, which includes innovation pathways, regulatory sandbox, and the digital sandbox as well. And we recognise the pressures that consumers are under with the cost of living crisis. So we've really spent a lot of time doubling down our efforts on supporting firms who are focused on financial inclusion. So in 2022, we saw an increase in the amount of applications from firms focusing on debt advice, on salary advance schemes, on no-interest loans, for example. We're also increasing and improving the firm experience for our innovation services. So as Jessica mentioned earlier, we're operating a single front door for all of those firm support services, supported by a range of digital tools, including automated decision trees, an FAQ digital assistant as well. So firms can really know that the service that they are applying for suits and meets their needs. We're also creating, enabling our digital sandbox to be a permanent capability, so it will sit alongside our regulatory sandbox and innovation pathways offering as that permanent capability. And it will also have increased connectivity with our regulator-to-regulator platform, which is known as the FCA Knowledge Zone. We also work with other regulators as well. So the DRCF, the Digital Regulatory Cooperation Forum, with 3 other regulators, really focusing on how we can work together on the cross-sectoral challenges when it comes to innovation, particularly in relation to online harm, online safety, is really important. And everything that I've explained so far really supports our overall direction as a regulator to support the new consumer duty, which is all about an outcomes-focused approach to enhancing the duty of care when it comes to consumers.
Wonderful, thank you.
Well, Emma, in the United States, it may come as no surprise, we have a pretty complex regulatory landscape. And so all the banking agencies and even the market agencies to some extent have come out with statements over the last several years saying that they promote and foster and encourage innovation. In reality, the devil is in the detail in terms of what that actually means on the enforcement front and the licensing and regulatory fronts. But at least on the surface, I think innovation is certainly a goal. I think it's important to understand that the agencies themselves, their statutory mandate is not limited to innovation. It's really to these classic things like safety and soundness, consumer protection, financial stability. So to the extent that financial innovation runs up against those classic mandates, the statutory mandates are going to prevail. But at least in theory, all the agencies have come out certainly in support of innovation. I think the complexity really is how these agencies interact with one another and how they cooperate, and to the extent sometimes these regulatory roles conflict. And that's why it makes it quite difficult for fintechs to operate in the United States.
Absolutely. Just staying with you for a moment then, do you think possibly that protecting the consumers is definitely trumping innovation at the moment?
I think certainly, thinking about the regulatory spectrum or pendulum, we're certainly entering into an era of re-regulation, if you want to call it that, or heightened enforcement. And I do think that consumer protection is taking on a heightened focus for all sorts of reasons. I mean, one, the fintech industry is just much more mature, right? And there's less of a expectation that we're not a bank, we're just a fintech. Look the other way. I don't think that flies anymore with the regulators, and certainly you have certain regulators that are much more incentivized to be enforcement regulators or be enforcement focused on the consumer protection front. I mean, the CFPB, or the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau in specific, its primary mandate is consumer protection. And then you have other agencies like the Federal Trade Commission, and then 50 attorneys general, which AG stands for aspiring governor. So there's just a lot of incentives for the various U.S. bodies to prioritize consumer protection at the moment.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Reuben, what are you seeing in Singapore?
Right, so there are 3 main things perhaps I'll just call out how we as an association support innovation and support our members. So first one is what we really call beyond FinTech, because financial technology right now has really kind of moved beyond just supporting the financial sector. And you have a lot of other things like cross-border payments, buy now, pay later, green FinTech, crypto, Web3, and these are really programs that are solutions that are really going beyond just financial sector. So one of the things that we really try to do is to help different industries like retailers, merchants, etc., to really have a better sense of what FinTech is and how they can adopt it to support their business. Second one that we do is it's kind of like a word called advocacy. So as you have rightly pointed out, regulation is always going through changes, because you have a lot of new things going on. So at SFA, we bring the members together, represent their voice, filter the messages, and make sure that we present the right situation to the regulators so that we can have a right way forward. And last but not least, Singapore, for those who've been to Singapore, we are really very small. From east to west, it's probably like 50 kilometers. So, and yet we have about 1,500 FinTech companies, and that's because a lot of them use Singapore as a hub for APAC region, or if not at the very least, Southeast Asia. And Southeast Asia is kind of a complicated bifurcated market. It's a huge market of close to 600 million people, and they are young and growing. But do note that it comprises of 10, if not going to 11 countries. So these 11 countries have different cultural, has different financial situation, economic status. So in Singapore itself, we have a lot of talent who understand the landscape of this market and know how to navigate. So it's good to then use Singapore as a chance to expand that. And that's kind of ways that we support them.
Thank you. Anna.
Well, probably just to pick up on a couple of points. First of all, I quite like how Reuben said the strategy is going beyond FinTech, and I think that's something similar to what's happening in Australia. We're really not just looking at the traditional financial services, but really how FinTech is and financial innovation is impacting every part of individuals' life and where the interventions are required. And I think to pick up on the first point around putting consumer at the centre, I think that's also something that's quite critical and something that Australia is doing. One of the examples that I do like to highlight is our consumer data rights legislation. So it is really a data policy. It's not a solely financial services policy, and it's looking at various aspects of the economy and really enabling consumers and putting consumers at the centre and enabling them to manage various aspects of their data that can help them make more informed decisions and select better and cheaper services. The consumer data rights started with open banking, learning from a lot what UK has done in that space, but last year we've entered the space of energy, and this year we are going to expand it to telecom, and then we're also starting to look at broader sort of open finance and the impact across insurance, pension, non-bank lending. So I think that's a great example where sort of Australian regulation is really trying to catch up with what's happening in the world of financial services innovation, and not sort of fall too far behind. But I think it's not just about implementing that legislation, but it's also continuing to monitor it and ensure that it's working. So we were all very pleased to see when the Australian Competition and Consumer Association announced a couple of months ago that they're really looking at enforcing banks' participation and other sort of large corporates' participation in the consumer data rights and ensuring that they are sharing the right level of information. So I think it's important that it's not just implemented, but we're continuing to monitor it and we ensure that competitive environment is facilitated on an ongoing basis. And the final thing I think I'd say is it's just something that I'm personally passionate about, and I think that's something that we all have a role to play. And I think it's around education and increasing financial literacy across consumers. It's all good for us to produce some great and innovative solutions and tools. It's good for us to implement appropriate regulation, but I think we also need to think really hard about what are we doing to actually enable and educate consumers to take advantage of those tools and really actively participate in this financial transition and innovation. And I think that's not just for government or regulators, that's something that all of us need to play an active role in.
Thank you. Mark, I know we touched on it briefly in your first answer when we were talking about regulatory landscape, but what do you think the main challenges are for the FinTech industry?
Sure. Well, there's certainly a lot facing the industry at the moment. Maybe just to start with the obvious, the business environment is just fundamentally different than it was even a year ago. It's harder to raise money. It's not impossible, but certainly hard. Business evaluations have certainly met the law of gravity in some cases. So it's just a tough business market. One of the second challenges I would say continues to be the regulatory and enforcement environment. The regulatory environment remains complex. There's not a consolidation of agencies anytime soon happening. So there's just a lot of activity at the individual agency levels, thinking about enforcement, perhaps new rules. And so that remains as complex as ever. I think certainly for new entrants to the US, that remains sometimes a bit of a shock, just the fact that there are so many agencies, and not only at the federal level, but then state banking agencies that are highly incentivized to look at under the hood at things. And that just, I think, is an ever-present one. But I'd say the third one is this issue of due diligence, which we're seeing become much more of a prolonged process, and that is because it's just, well, like it ties to my first point, it's just harder to raise money. The investors are looking with much more scrutiny of a fintech's business and its regulatory hygiene and compliance infrastructure than ever before. And the banking agencies themselves are scrutinizing bank investors on what their own due diligence processes are. We just saw this just last week. The OCC was sending out inquiries to various banks on their fintech due diligence processes. So there's that. I think the other thing too is the private equity investors and venture capital firms. They're looking at due diligence in a much searching way than before, largely because this issue of regulatory hygiene is so important. It's the fintech's enforcement history, whether it has appropriate licenses, whether its new business activities might run up against certain regulatory change and enforcement processes. All these things are contributing to a much tougher environment.
Absolutely. And are we seeing the same challenges in other regions?
Yeah, we do, and I think particularly linked to Mark's point, something that we hear businesses talk a lot about is the time that it takes to receive regulatory approvals, licenses, and the impact that has then on their ability to move fast, to attract capital, because they do need to prove to their investors that they can actually do it and grow fast in different markets. I know Ravi talked a bit about sandboxes, and I think they are great initiatives from regulators to allow businesses to start to test, innovate their products. Similar to the UK, in Australia we do have a regulatory sandbox. We call it an enhanced sandbox because it's a kind of a version 2.0. It's a new iteration of the sandbox, and what it allows businesses to do is to really start to enter the Australian market, start to test their solutions, operate under the existing licenses that have in the UK existing licenses for the first 24 months while they're going through approvals processes in Australia. And we've seen great examples of UK businesses like Revolut who were able to enter that way. It took them 9 months to get their Australian licenses, but during that period they operated under the sandbox and they were able to start testing and delivering their products to consumers. So I think that's a great initiative on behalf of government. I think the other area that we see a lot is conversation around talent. We're all on the hunt for talent, so it is definitely a pain point, and I think there's a role for everyone to play in looking at how can we grow talent. So there's a lot that we should be doing in terms of the education, working with universities, really growing talent from early ages, but also then how can we share and exchange talent. And we're quite excited about the Australia-UK Free Trade Agreement, which should enter into force very soon, because it will provide those improved mobility provisions for UK innovators to come to Australia and Australian innovators to go to the UK, and for companies to bring people across under the new intra-company transfers as well. So I think that's probably the other area that we're quite focused on.
And if I could just jump in on talent part as well. So I think talent is really a situation that everyone faces, from Australia to the UK and right now in Singapore as well. And I think from talent perspective, particularly for FinTech talent, for those who are interested, SFA, we actually produce what we call Singapore FinTech Talent Report, and we literally break down what exactly is a talent in FinTech space it itself. Anyway, as the saying goes, the days are long, the years are short. So in the FinTech sector in particular, you before you knew it, every day you just work so hard, and after that you look back like, oh, the time has gone. So, and because it has a lot of unique specific factors, so in that report we kind of really call out what it is. In terms of how we address that in Singapore, it's really a whole of government approach that we have taken over there. From a two perspective, one is how we bring in foreign talent, foreign expertise. So that one come September, we have a new framework, a Compass framework, COMPASS, a Compass framework. So what it does is that it really makes it very clear on how do you qualify to get yourself a work permit or employment pass in Singapore. So that kind of clears the black box stuff, which is very useful for everyone who are looking to hire from outside. From within itself, as I mentioned, there's a whole government approach. We have different government agencies like Enterprise Singapore, is similar to Austrade, and they have come up with a few programs called EntrePass, where we're expediting the technology founders to Singapore. On top of that, we recognize that there are a lot of talents who are tech trained in the past, but have gone different ways, like sales and BD and stuff like that. So we have come up with a program with Workforce Singapore, which is another government agency, and the program is called Career Conversion Program, which is very interesting because we are then really calling out people who have tech background, but who have not done tech, and we are inviting them to come back with a very curated program. So it's really both in and out that we're trying to address that.
Thank you. Anna, sticking with challenges, what does the role of collaboration play in addressing global challenges?
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan of collaboration and partnerships. I think it's so much easier to solve problems together. We can innovate much better if we work together on different solutions. But outside of that, obviously, each of our regions have different strengths. So Australians look to the UK because it's a larger market. UK looks to Australia because it gives them access to APAC. So there's a lot of benefits for us to work together. I think particular examples that we've seen, and we've been quite fortunate in FinTech that our governments do work very closely together. So whether it's the Austrade and DBT, whether it's FCA and ASIC, who are our equivalent, we've been working together for quite some years. We've implemented Australia-UK FinTech Bridge, which really allows that extra level of collaboration between various entities, and we've seen some great results. So you can see that FCA and ASIC worked really closely and collaborated on various legislations. So there's a lot of similarities across open banking and the consumer data rights in Australia. Yes, they're different because we are different, but there are a lot of similarities that help businesses grow and expand. We've seen some great examples like Bud, who obviously really scaled their offering and solution here on the back of open banking, and now they've been able to really grow in Australia on the back of the consumer data rights because it gives them similar sort of access and provisions. So we've also collaborated on various payments, policies and legislations, which absolutely will make it easier for businesses to operate in each other's jurisdictions. And under the Australia-UK FinTech Bridge, we've also seen FCA and ASIC agree that businesses can access each other's sandboxes and innovation pathways. And we've seen great examples of that where UK businesses coming to Australia can access Australian ASIC sandbox and really grow their solutions, like Revolut, who I mentioned earlier, and we've seen the same replicated here into the UK as well. So yeah, I think there's a lot there to say for collaboration and what we can achieve if we really open up those pathways and share learnings and insights.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other comments on collaboration globally?
Yeah, I think from a GFIN perspective, be important to share on that. So GFIN was established in 2019 with 12 founding regulators, and that's grown exponentially to over 80 regulators. And the purpose of GFIN is to allow regulators to share insights, best practice, to encourage and conduct cross-border experimentation with the overall aim to promote international financial stability. And we've made that really tangible by establishing an 18-month roadmap. So even over the last year, we have achieved a number of things. For example, we hosted a RegTech and SupTech showcase event with 75 regulators. We produced a report and published that on the back of that. We've had two of our leading regulators conduct a cross-jurisdictional AI and ML report, which has been published. And we also published the lessons learned from our cross-border testing version 1, which has largely shaped our next cross-border test, which is known as the GFIN Greenwashing Tech Sprint, which will be a virtual tech sprint hosted on our digital sandbox, which will bring together innovators, firms and regulators to really address sustainable finance as a collective priority. Specifically, we're looking at developing solutions to address the risks of greenwashing, both from a regulator perspective, but also market perspective. So it has a RegTech and SupTech component to it. The application window opens today. It closes on the 21st of May, and we'll look to onboard those selected firms in early June. and then have a showcase in September. So there's a lot going on in the GFin space in terms of how we're supporting collaboration, and pleased to say, ASIC and MAS, and we have a number of US regulators who are all part of GFin.
Oh, I'm so pleased to hear it. Excellent.
Right, so maybe on the topic of collaboration, I'll just sum up by saying that look out for Singapore FinTech Festival. So this is something, it's really a big FinTech carnival festival, as you like it, in mid-November, starting on the 15th. It's really huge, where we bring about more than 20,000 delegates from last year edition, we have more than 100 countries delegation right in Singapore. So it's really where you witness, it's testimony of collaboration. So it's hopefully you find your partners, whether it's upstream or downstream, and from there you use Singapore as a hub to go to different parts of the region, including UK and Australia and US as well.
Mark, any final thoughts?
Definitely. I think on collaboration, one of the things that I would note is that, so the White House issued an executive order last year directing the U.S. banking agencies and the U.S. market regulators to collaborate better together, just thinking domestically, just because there's so many issues such as crypto regulation and the customer aspects of FinTech regulation that really do need kind of a broader collaboration amongst regulators. So that's still in the works. I think, it remains to be seen how effective that is and whether that's actually happening. But I think the recent events of the failures of the second and third largest banks in the United States last month, I think has pushed, it made a stronger call for the banking agencies to come together on certain topics like liquidity management and overall risk management themes. So it's a busy time to be a lawyer.
It certainly is. I think you make a very good point, actually, about how collaboration should happen domestically as well as globally. But I think certainly we seem to be on the right track. We have run out of time. I want to say a big thank you to my wonderful panelists. Thank you so much for your brilliant, insightful answers. A huge thank you to Janine and the entire Innovate Finance team for putting on such a wonderful conference over today and tomorrow. It's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you.